Bingo, it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday. We're here with Tyler McMahon. He's an English professor at HPU. We are so delighted to have him on the show. Thank you for coming down and waiting around, Tyler.
Thank you for having me, Jay. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, I always really like to talk to English professors, especially professors who have written books, you know, because we know that it's hard to write books. You've got to build a kind of a narrative. Oh my God, is that using the wrong word or what? A narrative in a book. Imagine.
Right.
It's not so easy.
Yeah, no, it is hard. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. We talk about how you do that. We're here on Community Matters, and we're calling this show Finding Yourself in the Language. That's very subjective on my part, but Tyler agreed that it was okay, so we're going to use that. Finding yourself in the language. So first thing is, you know, top down. What is it? What's happening at Ko'olau? You have a writer's workshop, you mentioned?
That's right, yes. Every year we do the Ko'olau Writers Workshop. It's this year it's scheduled for April 9th, and it will be on the Hawaii Loa campus out in Kaneohe. And Nora Keller is going to be our keynote speaker, the author of Comfort Woman and Fox Girl, great local novelist. We're still putting a lot of the other pieces into place, but it's sort of like an all-day event. It runs from about 9 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon, and we'll have little breakout sessions in poetry, fiction, nonfiction, script writing for interested aspiring writers from the community to go and attend. The registration is, I believe, about $40 for the full price. And
if I wanted to sign up early, what would I do?
We haven't opened up for registrations yet. We probably will within the next month or so, but you can look at ko'olauwritersworkshop.org. We have a website that will have links to all of our to the purchase sites and whatnot as we go forward, and we should have that together pretty soon. And we will probably have an early bird rate as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm glad we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, but I wonder, I've never been to a writer's workshop. I know a lot of people who go to them religiously that really care a lot.
Really?
And they suck up every piece of information they can get. They do as much networking as they could get. I guess they want to be published.
Right.
And they figure this is going to help. But query, when you go to a writer's workshop, you're going to learn how to write. And you want these authors to tell you how they write, isn't it? So it's a how to do it kind of experience, isn't it?
Our event is, yes. I mean, I think the word workshop refers to some type of peer review experience. That's, you know, what in academia, at least, if you see a course that's a workshop course, it's usually going to be a matter of, you know, students sharing their work with each other and giving each other hopefully helpful feedback on it, definitely feedback. And, you know, it has come to kind of refer to other types of educational contexts, but it's definitely, our event is a little bit more top-down than that. I mean, there usually is in-class writing exercises and a bit of sharing work orally and whatnot. I mean, it's a one-day situation, so we don't have the opportunity for people to take work home and process it and bring it back and whatnot. But we hope we can kind of build up connections so that folks can have writing groups and meet peers that they feel the same way about. But you're correct that there are a lot of these, you might call them conferences or things like that, where people do go and spend a day or several days listening to lectures and seminars and whatnot from writers or publishing professionals. And you know, it's an interesting phenomenon to me as somebody who works at a university, because the way we teach writing, and I'm certainly a product of kind of the traditional educational model. You know, it's very well suited, I think, to a young person in their 20s or early 30s who doesn't have, you know, a ton of responsibilities, career, family-wise. And I find I'm kind of encouraged by the growth of this other sector that's out there to educate people who perhaps, you know, aren't able to move to a college town for a few years, who aren't able to, you know, take classes at noon on a Monday and things like that, that they're able to get some of that experience. I mean, it's, you know, there's critics of those types of events because they are often for-profit and whatnot, and you know, they often do focus on the kind of, suppose you could say, like careerist side of it. You know, how to meet agents and publishers and
Yeah,
things like
it's a
that.
business. It's an
Right.
industry. I want to go back to something you said, though. You said orally share their work.
Mm-hmm.
And that suggests that somebody's reading their work.
Right,
to you.
right.
And certainly that's very interesting. And I noticed recently, I mean, I should have picked it up before, but Amazon is selling, audio of the books,
Yeah.
of any book, really. I mean, a matter of getting around to it. So you can put the headset on, you can listen to somebody, the author maybe,
Right.
reading his own book. And I mean, do you agree with me that it's better, more interesting to have the author himself or herself read the book to you?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think there's a level of sincerity to that that's really kind of special. I certainly have been very inspired by the readings I've attended throughout my life. I mean, it's hard to make time for those all the time, and sometimes they're difficult to gauge whether they're going to be good or not. But I mean, I've been very moved sometimes by showing up to hear an author I wasn't familiar with read from their work. The Amazon situation is an interesting one. I mean, I've never personally had this problem, but I can only imagine. I can only imagine what the process is like when they determine whether an author, has the chops to read their own work or not. I know I've listened to Sandra Cisneros read her work, and her readings are really kind of dramatic events. She does voices and things like that, and she's obviously has a talent for it. Somebody like David Sedaris, who, the oral kind of interpretation has always been a big part of his career, is really good at it too. But other times they'll hire an actor and bring them in. Part of the Amazon sort of explosion in that segment, though, is the development of this text-to-speech technology, where they can essentially put the files.
They don't need you anymore.
Right. You're going to be replaced by a robot.
With voices and everything.
That's right. As soon as they can get robots to write the novels, they will.
Coming soon. Have you ever listened to that program on NPR on Saturday afternoons? Something Shorts.
I have, yeah. Selected shorts.
Selected Shorts.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, not all of them.
Right,
Some of them, go flat on me, but a lot of them are really powerful stuff.
Right.
And reading is such an art. I mean, reading aloud is such an art.
Yeah.
You're right. Not every author can do it the way, you want.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But, I want to make a comparison, though. Let's take another program. What's his name? The guy who does American Life, which is earlier on Saturday.
Right.
I'm picking one. Now, it's radio. And most of it is written out. And they sit at a table there. This is not the part where they record third parties, but where there's somebody actually doing the message. And they're reading. Okay, they're reading from a paper that they probably either wrote or edited.
Right.
Okay, so what's the difference between Selected Shorts and American Life? Not that much.
Right.
It's literature. They call it radio literature anyway.
Yeah.
It's literature, all the same. And I'm thinking the conversion of the written word to the oral word that's a great experience. But we have to see it all around us. And on television, we here in the studio, we have a teleprompter.
Right.
And you can't make light of the fact that the teleprompter must be written well if the oral is going to sound halfway decent. So that's another example.
Oh, absolutely.
Of connection with the writing.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just a thought. And I wanted to explore with you what it is like to be an English professor, because you are the holder of the sacred key, to their lives in many ways. The quality of your life.
Well, now I'm getting a little bit more anxious about it.
Well, don't you agree that, if it's someone who is capable of understanding the language, speaking the language, especially orally in a speech, especially, but in dealing with those symbols of thought,
Right.
that is words.
Right.
Somebody who understands that, wraps his mind around that, is good at it, is going to he's much more likely to be successful in the world today.
Right.
And so you are the holder of the sacred key.
Yeah.
Their futures.
It's interesting that, it's, because I think a lot of us in the liberal arts and the humanities are kind of recently feel a little bit under siege, that we're not, I find that students have become, especially in the last 5 years, have become extremely value conscious. I mean, it seems to me that the talk about just the financial crisis and the kind of unprecedented levels of debt that students are asked definitely gotten through to them in a way that's kind of sad. I mean, it certainly seems like a heavy burden to bear, but it might bring about some changes.
How has it gotten through to them?
They
How
all
has it changed them?
Well, they make choices based on it. I mean, I think when I was a college student, I was telling this to somebody the other day, the prevailing driver of my decisions was, the kind of mass of films and television shows that had convinced me that university was going to be this, great time in my life where I was going to, have the most fulfilling social kind of life I'd ever had and have crazy adventures and things like that. And, I was driven by the idea that this is where I was going to produce my future nostalgia and memories and things like that. And money, I would have...
Building nostalgia for the future. Yeah, I love it.
And, I certainly didn't have to have a part-time job then. I mean, I did go to a school that was in state and whatnot, so it wasn't...
Where was that?
University of Virginia. But
great school.
Yeah, a great school, a great state school.
Undergraduate school.
Absolutely,
too.
a great English department.
Yeah.
So it was something that I certainly didn't. I never questioned the decision. It wasn't sort of a matter of, oh boy, do I need to finish my degree quicker? Do I need to not take summer school because of the cost of credits and things like that? And the students that I have now are very aware of what their scholarship opportunities are. They're aware of finishing on time. They're aware that another year in school is going to be burdensome down the road. They all have part-time jobs. I mean, for very few of them are they full-time students, and those that are often, do have financial subsidies of one kind or another.
That's really too bad, isn't it?
It's different. I mean, I think it is bad for them. I mean, I think they're going to miss out on something. I think it might, form a sort of a correction in the way that we're charging for university education now. It might bring about some changes in what we emphasize. It might bring teaching back to the forefront in terms of where your dollars go. But in the short term, I think a lot of us who are in the humanities feel that we might miss out on some students who want to have a degree that they can immediately put to use in the workplace. And the irony is that we've gotten emails from insurance companies, from all kinds of private sector businesses that only want to recruit English majors because they've crunched the data and they've found that their English majors are extremely successful.
That's what I was saying before.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can speak the language, you're ahead of the next guy who can't.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to use language, and
why
not
is
everybody,
that,
but
we're
many
talking
people.
about a social thing. We're talking about a kind of community thing, a cultural thing around the country or maybe the world, or is it something else? Is it that if I can speak the language, it means I can think better? Because after all, I'm using the same symbols,
right?
In expressing the same symbols as you would think in your head. I don't think the processes are that different. So therefore, maybe I can think better at a higher level, and B, I can convince the other guy that I think at a higher level because he can see what I'm thinking from my words.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there is something to that. Sometimes I get frustrated with, especially being a novelist. When we hear about some of the sort of quote unquote big great American novelists like a Jonathan Franzen or a John Irving or someone like that, we're so often talking about, oh, this is such a brilliant book, this is such a smart writer and things like that. And I do sometimes have frustrations with the idea that manipulating language is the same thing as intelligence, the ability to manipulate language effectively is the same thing as intelligence, because I really like to think about writing as a sort of craft and a practice that you need to spend a lot of time at and develop your skill set. Not so much a matter of just dictating great ideas, which is what a lot of students come to fiction writing with.
Huge emotional aspect to writing a novel.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the human condition.
Sure,
Finding truths about the human condition that
Right.
maybe nobody has thought of before.
Right, right. Yeah, though I do kind of, I guess my concern is with the notion that you think your way towards a novel. I mean, I really think you write your way towards a novel, and those ideas often come through the writing process rather than the sort of scratch in your head, pondering process. But I do think you're absolutely right, and what we do, the ways that we measure sort of competence and smarts are usually based in language, whether it's a standardized test or a campaign speech or whatever it might be.
That's apropos to modern times, isn't it? We're going to take a short break. We're going to come right back. We'll get back into this with Tyler McMahon, English professor at HPU, talking about finding yourself in the language. And we are. We're having a wonderful time. We'll be right back.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Mahalo for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. We are a channel dedicated to raising public awareness about the importance of technology, energy, diversification, and globalism to the future of Hawaii. We broadcast and stream daily from 1 to 5 every weekday, and we broadcast on Olelo 54 and OC16 TV. All of our shows are archived on thinktechhawaii.com, and we hope to see you there. Aloha.
We couldn't come back soon enough. We should have come back sooner. That's how important this conversation is. Okay, Community Matters, finding yourself in a language with Tyler McMahon, English professor at HPU. I'm so glad you're here. So here you are, an English professor, okay? There's an image there, stoic, disciplined, steeped in ancient classical literature. Not true, not true.
Right.
You can't do that
in my
now.
case,
It's
yeah.
not possible. So how did you get from there, I mean, wherever there is, you can tell me where there is, to writing novels?
Well, it's sort of went the other way around, I suppose. I mean, I was an English major as an undergraduate, and I think like a lot of people of my generation, that essentially meant being an English literature major. Creative writing classes were a part of the curriculum, but were certainly not the front and center the way they have grown to be in the last decade or so. And I really enjoyed fiction writing, and I wanted to spend more time on that. So I went to graduate school and got a fine arts degree, a master's of fine arts in creative writing.
Oh, you can get a fine arts in creative writing?
Yeah, it's actually...
I always thought fine arts was like painting.
Yeah, painting and performing arts as well were sort of the, or visual arts and performing arts, studio art, I suppose, is what they would say. We're really the kind of the pioneers of that degree. But when they started creative writing education, Wallace Stegner and others, in the 20th century, they made a really conscious choice to not, the original programs weren't even housed within English departments necessarily. The big Iowa program, they started their own sort of center, and I think the Stanford program did the same thing. And they wanted to borrow that pedagogy from fine arts, so that would be a kind of studio experience where it was a lot of peer review and not necessarily theory, a lot more sort of craft and practice. And that appealed to me very much because I really did want to sort of work in the medium more than I wanted to necessarily.
Medium.
Yeah.
That sounds like fine arts too.
Yeah, we've stolen a lot of their moves. And it certainly was a nice degree for me because it allows a lot of flexibility. A lot of people who get that degree don't necessarily become academics. But I happen to. I mean, I was able to get teaching experience there and enjoyed it and was hired by HPU for their, primarily to be
Straight out of your degree.
There was about a year difference, but yeah, during in the year that I was after I graduated from graduate school, I was hired.
Have a breather.
Yeah, and started the following fall.
Yeah. And we're still going to go on this track about how you got converted or became interested in writing novels. But I want to make this comment though. We do a lot of science. A lot of people who sit in that chair talking about science. And science is so dynamic; it changes all the time.
Right.
I mean, you can't hardly open a website for a given area of science on a given day and find the articles popping up at you from all over the world. So much change. Okay, and going into English, one thinks, and I know it's not true, but one thinks that English isn't like science because it stays the same. And I suggest to you, from our short discussion, that the language doesn't stay the same, and teaching it doesn't stay the same, and reading it doesn't stay the same. It's all dynamic.
Yeah, and I think what we call English department has changed considerably, even from the time I was an undergraduate. Like I said, it was virtually all literature. 80% or 90% of your degree would be literature, and it was all written in English originally. Now, and I can actually remember being an undergraduate and talking to other English majors who were interested in becoming professors, and the sort of prevailing logic was, if you really wanted to shore yourself up and ensure that you would have a career as an English professor, the best thing you could do was study Old English and be the resident sort of Old English guy on a given department. Now, I mean, we don't have an Old English person in our department. We don't feel any need for one.
If you did, he wouldn't be there long.
Right. So, I mean, now the department I work in is really it's mostly literature, but it's all sorts of literature. I mean, it's not the canonical texts that were originally written in English. I mean, we do all sorts of things in translation.
The canonical texts.
Right.
My wife and I speak of little else at dinner. A library full of them,
Right,
I'm
right.
kidding.
And we have a lot of writing classes, be they composition or be they creative writing, theory classes and film and media studies courses, things of this nature. Some courses that focus on the teaching of writing and other things. So we really become a big tent, and I think there's a lot of advantages to that. I think especially for the students, they enjoy having all those opportunities.
Well, you've convinced me that writing must follow reality. I mean, if the world is changing, then writing must change. But I'd like you to try to convince me that the world must follow the writing.
Huh. Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's, I think you were saying a moment ago, all of these other things that we consider influential, be they podcasts or teleprompters or whatnot, they do have a sort of language form. And whether, if you're interested in making films or video games or that sort of thing, you're usually going to have to kind of convince somebody to fund you or to support you via written, treatment or something of this nature. So, I think it's relevant.
Yeah, well, even as I posed the question to, I said, "What a silly question!" Because there's nothing more influential than the written or spoken word, which is often based on writing.
Right.
In terms of human conduct around and it has been that way since the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can remember really vividly when I think I was in college at this time, going up to, I'm from near DC, and going to see, I think it was a Rothko exhibit at the National Gallery, and it was all of these giant paintings, mostly it was later Rothko, so it was mostly like one color, but...
I don't think he did less than 6 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah, and at this point it was 3 colors max that would take up the whole walls, and they were all over the gallery, and then there was one little panel of text that was giving his biography or some information about the paintings, and of the 100 people that were in the gallery, probably 90 of them were hunched over that piece of text reading it. And as I often talk to my students about, when it comes to literature or be it music or other things, when those arts are in are part of the historical record. We often need kind of contextualization to help appreciate them. You know, you might, as much as we like to think that our favorite song exists in a vacuum, we enjoy it because of the associations we have with it and because of the, you know, how it distinguished itself from the rest of the tradition as we knew it and things like that, and for the new ground that we think it was, we feel that it was breaking. So I still think there's a lot to be said for, you know, criticism and that sort of writing.
Yes, and what do they call it? Out of the box thinking, you know. But you know what, it strikes me also, just to add to the fuel of this discussion, is that if you were writing in the 17th century, your words were not going to go very far. I mean, maybe they would into the future in time, as being republished.
Yeah.
But in that moment, in the 17th century, whatever, it didn't get very far. So, you know, even though they had printing. Now, you could write one sentence, and it could be known throughout the world, you know, to billions and billions of people in no time, in a matter of hours.
Right.
That sentence could, you know, reach them and conceivably change the way they conduct business and conduct themselves. That is the most remarkable thing that has ever happened in humanity.
Right.
And you could do it. I could do it. You have
Yeah.
to think of the right words.
Right.
We could, you know, what a contest that would be. And
You know, it's
we could have a workshop and trying to affect public opinion around the world with one sentence.
Right.
Write the sentence.
Well, put it under the photo of a cat, and I think you'll rally your best chance. But it's interesting you say that, because I feel like a lot of my peers, a lot of the other novelists out there, we feel a lot of anxiety over the nature of the times that we live in, because it's so crowded with voices and so many, you know, a lot of people speak of the fear of there being more writers than readers out there in some ways. But, you know, the flip side of the coin is it's like, it's almost, you know, when people talk about the most loneliest place in the world being a big city, you know, it's almost this sort of huge plurality of voices that are out there. It's harder to distinguish oneself, and it's hard to get a reader's full attention, you know, whereas maybe not the 17th century, but if you're in the 19th or early 20th century, you had a sort of sweet spot there.
So, knowing that, or at least suspecting it at the time, nevertheless, you want to present your soul, your language, your relationship with words and ideas and human condition as a novelist. What made you do that? Because you're all in.
Yeah.
What made you do that?
Well, you know, I wouldn't say that it necessarily was a calculated decision based on how to reach people. I mean, it definitely suits me and my personality. I think, you know, I, like many other sort of young writers, I got turned down mostly through teachers and through classes. I mean, I liked to read as a kid. But
Was there one class, one teacher?
There was a teacher that I had for my freshman English class, which was really a composition course that, looking back on it, it seems like he must have broken all of the rules, because we wrote short stories and things like that in there, and he turned me on to a lot of reading that I really enjoyed.
Remember his name?
Oh yeah, I'm good friends with him now. His name's Paul Diamond. And
That's wonderful.
We've worked together on things since, yeah.
Isn't it strange how one teacher, and you know, you've had a lot of teachers,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can't remember all their names.
Not all of them, most of them. Just the really good ones and the really bad ones. But, you know, and like many folks in the academy, we focused on short work, you know, and I think it's mostly just a logistical question, is you can workshop a 10-page story by 15 students really easily. You can't necessarily workshop a novel. And as much as I moved away from the short forms, you know, I did learn a lot from that. It was nice to be able to try so many different things, and also to really work on kind of executing at a high level over a smaller body of work.
We're going to take a short break. But when we come back from this short break, we're going to answer the big question, is what is the difference between the short form and the long
Great.
form in terms of conceptualizing and executing? We'll be right
Excellent.
back.
Aloha, my name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on Think Tech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education, from early education through K-12, all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper. We try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on Think Tech Hawaii. And later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Names.
It's-
We're back.
Oh,
Don't spill.
Okay.
Okay, so the cliffhanger question is, qu'est-ce que c'est la différence between the short form and the long form?
That's a great question, and it's something that I've thought about a lot and I've read about a lot. I can't remember who said that and let me just preface this by saying that there's a lot of exceptions. I mean, there are really successful novels out there that don't relate to other novels very well and are going to, you could hold them up and sort of contradict any kind of generalizations I might make about the form. But I agree with, I don't remember who said it, that the short story is more similar to a poem and the novel is more similar to a piece of drama, a screenplay, or a play. And I think that speaks to a kind of structural aspect. I certainly, I find that I enjoy writing novels. I like to have that thing to return to every morning, and there's a certain kind of satisfaction I get out of it, even if it's not doesn't get out there to everywhere. Shortly, if you asked me to write told me I could, had a year to write a book of fiction, I could either do a collection of stories or a novel. I think I would be very intimidated by the idea of doing a book of stories, just because I feel like the writing is very front and center. I feel like the language and the sort of turns of phrase and the small matters of execution it just feels like a very vulnerable type of thing to me. And with a novel, I feel like I can hide behind the story a little bit, I suppose.
Well, what I also hear you saying is you live in it.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
becomes your world. You own it, and you have the power of making it anything you want, making these characters do things and testing them against the boundaries of that
Right,
world.
right.
You're creating this enormous thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and that breadth is a big thing, because it often feels like you can have it both ways. I mean, you can have a character make a bad decision and later in the book make a good decision and whatnot, and that works out pretty well. A few of the things that so those are some of the things you might find in a book on novel writing or at one of those workshop experiences. What I've personally found to be some of the differences, I find that a sympathetic protagonist, or a protagonist that appears overtly sympathetic early on, seems to be more important in a novel. And I feel, obviously there are exceptions like Lolita or some of the great works of literature where you have these despicable characters that we just can't sort of look away from. Yeah. To me, I find that difficult to do. I find it difficult to pull a reader through 300 pages if they really don't like the character or the narrator, or don't see any redeeming qualities there. So
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's, I feel like it's about the time investment in a lot of ways. I think they just have to kind of make a commitment in early on in the book. So I've found
Is
that.
it because they tend to relate to that character? They want to see themselves in him?
Yeah, I think it's, you drive by a car wreck and you maybe can't take your eyes off of it, but that doesn't mean you're going to look at it for, 12 hours or something, you know what I mean? So with a short story, I think you have a little bit more leeway to push their sympathy and to push the boundaries of what the reader will endure. And
Endure.
yeah, and the biggest lesson that I've learned is, since I've been writing novels, I've found that I have to be aware of the tension and release in the book in a way that I never really was aware writing shorter pieces. I think in a short story, and obviously, some of the authors of really big, sort of breathy short stories an Alice Munro or someone like that, does everything that a novelist does in her shorter pieces. But for me, I think I'd written a lot of pieces that were just sort of ratcheting up the tension and then sort of cutting it off abruptly at some sort
In
of
a short story.
Yeah.
So it's like one cycle, one sine curve.
Exactly.
But in a novel, it's multiple sine
Right.
curves.
It's like verses and choruses and things like that. I feel like you need to give the reader some breathing room and whatnot. And that was something I had to learn how to do all over again, kind of.
But in general terms, I know there are many details to this, but in general terms, what do you want to create? What is most satisfying to you in terms of a successful novel?
Oh, that's a great question. Increasingly, I feel like when I started writing fiction, and I think about this a lot because I work with young people who are, I'm often interested in their motivations.
They teach you a lot.
Writing. They do, absolutely. It seems to me that when I started, there was a sort of kind of desire to express myself in maybe a way that I couldn't in words or deeds. That I don't feel so much anymore. Now I really feel like the novels are much more like an escape for me. Like when I'm writing them, I enjoy the kind of just checking out from my own life and checking in to the head of a character that's not me and not necessarily like me. And it used to be I really tortured over the pieces, for days at a time. Now, when I'm writing, and when I'm not even thinking about the piece. And it really is this sort of odd kind of respite from the rest of my life. And now I think I really want to do that for readers. I really want to kind of
bring him into your world.
Yeah, or I want
have him have the same experience.
Yeah, and to offer some kind of escape. Lately I've just felt like when I was younger, what I looked for in art was some kind of feeling that I wasn't alone, that other people felt the way I have, and some validation for my feelings. Now I feel much more like a kind of escapist. It almost seems like I'm asking to be entertained, or I want to entertain people, but I don't really run from that term. I think it's like a sort of just a little bit of a respite from other things, a little bit of a intelligent kind of break,
But are you saying that you avoid head-on collisions on controversies or controversial
not
issues?
at all. No.
You would do that. You would.
Yeah.
You would embrace that kind of
yeah.
controversy, include it in the book.
Right. And those are the things that I find stimulating in a lot of ways now. I feel like, it's just like the work of somebody like Aaron Sorkin or something like that. It's just the right level of sort of smartness that it stimulates me in a particular way, but it's not depressing the way just watching the news might be depressing. It's a sort of, I guess maybe it's not that different than what I first identified, which is this feeling that you're not alone, that there's others out there that feel this way, and you can kind of relate over this.
The liberty you can take is you can go further than the news.
Yes.
You can take this controversial issue and go way further down the track with
Absolutely. And it's, to me, and this was never my intention when I started writing fiction, the real joy of being a novelist for me the last few years has been, it's a very good kind of hobby if you kind of have it's a good way to indulge obsessions that last about 3 years. Like the things that I was writing about in my first novel, I'm not very interested in them anymore, but I sure was at the time, and I was interested in reading about them and watching films about them and talking about them. And so I think if I was a professor of history or of a particular era, it might get old, or you might just get a little bit.
Is it old now? Here, let's take one.
Okay.
Let's look at how the mistakes were made.
Speaking
Tyler
of
McMahon, and this is 2011.
2011, yeah, the
2011.
book came out.
So first of all, does this still interest you?
I'm proud of the book, and you know, it's still, I see what the attraction was, but I don't think I'd write another book about that subject now. You know, I feel like I really exercised a lot of that curiosity.
When you go back to it, I mean, I hope you do once in a while. Just
Once in a while,
open
yeah.
it at random. Do you like what you read? Do you like? Do you say, like I was telling you before? Do you say, "Is this really me? Did I really write this?" Or do you say, "That's my old friend Tyler"?
Yeah, I do. I sometimes I go, oh yeah, you know, I mean, there's things that I don't. I just am sort of like, oh, that's clever. I forgot how those things connected. Or, you know, in my memory, it seems simpler than it is now. You know, I still, the most, and this is kind of, I don't know if a lot of writers feel this way, but I noticed that, like, especially when I've done readings from that book more recently, if I've been invited to do a kind of event or something like that, there's always things at the sentence level that bother me where I sort of go, oh God, I should have used a different word there. Those two words repeat themselves.
Everything changes, including
Yeah.
your understanding of the language.
Right.
And isn't it wonderful? that
Yeah,
it does?
yeah. And it's not like, you know, I didn't fret over those sentences. It's just.
Yeah, it's true. But isn't it true, too, that you go back to something after some period of time and say, gee, I would have written it differently.
Oh, yeah.
I could have said that so much better.
Right. It's funny. I mean, because I question the language. I don't necessarily question the larger decisions. They all see, I can remember why I made them, and even, you know, when online commenters or things like that, you know, question them, I sort of go, no, that was still the right idea.
Well, this is about a band.
That's
I
right.
love the name of the band, The Mistakes.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole novel based on
Terrible
one pun.
implication.
Yeah.
And now this is more recent. Kilometer, I don't know, what's the right pronunciation?
I say
for you?
Kilometer, but
Kilometer 99. What does that imply?
that book takes place in El Salvador. It's about a couple of expat surfers who were sort of stuck down there after the big earthquake they had in 2001, and the title refers to a fictional surf spot that's kind of an unknown spot that they go to where a lot of different forces sort of collide, and I guess I just liked the sort of suggestion of extremis that it had in a way. Though it's I'm glad that you like it, Jay. A lot of people seem to have a hard time remembering it.
Well, so how would you say these books are different in terms of your experience in writing them and your appreciation of them now?
Right. Well, that's a great question, because I think I've read a lot of sort of testimonials by authors, and I'm very interested in process and how people write, especially when it comes to novels. How the Mistakes Were Made actually was very planned, I would say. And I was in a class when I was in graduate school, my final semester, about kind of the craft of the novel, which was really a life-changing class taught by a novelist named Brady Udall, who's a great novelist and teacher. And he actually had us sort of draft a first chapter of a novel and an outline. And I did that for this book in a very conceptual way. You know, I didn't necessarily know what would come of it, but and I certainly veered off of that original plan very, very dramatically. But that act of kind of thinking it through, you know, to the end and thinking about where these arcs might go, that was something I'd never done before. And I do it to varying degrees now. You know, it was certainly a couple, you know, I did make that sort of outline and revisited it. And he showed us a few kind of templates for how to structure a book and other forms. And one of the best things I did is I drafted that first chapter and kind of, you know, let it marinate in my mind for a long time and revisited it and tweaked it and whatnot before I went on to write the whole book. And I highly recommend that to anybody who's working on a novel, to sort of just write the first 10 or 20 pages and really get the character and the voice down.
Introduce yourself to your own character.
Yeah, and then don't push yourself into, you know, don't paint yourself into a corner by writing the rest of it and not knowing where it's going.
So, you know, there's a great French, I don't know, I keep on thinking French today. There was a great French sculptor, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but the idea was that he found the statue in the marble.
Right.
My question to you is, when you write these books,
that anecdote was in Rambo, I think, actually.
Are you finding the ultimate, schema of it in the marble that you start with, that first chapter? Or is that only a starting point and you actually find the schema of it outside the marble?
That's a great question. I think, for example, there's definitely a lot of that. I mean, there's definitely a lot of kind of getting deeper into the character's head and figuring out what really makes them tick and whatnot. But when I'm working on a novel, I mean, I think we often think about it starting, at the left and moving forward and adding chapter after chapter. For me, it's much more sort of starting, at the left and moving to the right, and then broadening it out as well, adding more lines and more sort of notions and things like that. It isn't always just about, I think, going deeper into what I've already created. A lot of times it's a matter of, reading something else, reading an article or a bit of kind of history or something, and incorporating that in and weaving it in and changing direction a lot of times.
Talk about dynamics, the dynamics of your own life.
Right.
Fed into the. I have to read these.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
I have to read them because of our discussion. And I really appreciate you coming down.
Oh,
here,
yeah,
Carol.
absolutely.
This was so stimulating.
Great
for
to
me.
be here.
I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I love it.
Just rambunctious all over the place, whatever comes to mind. I really like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Next
Appreciate
time
it.
soon.